I think the story of Christmas is so well communicated by children, but there are thousands and thousands of Christmas stories. Every magazine that has any kind of heart at all seems, during this time of the year, to give us stories to remember. What I would like to invite you to do is to reflect back on your life and try and remember one particular Christmas that might have stood out in your life to remind you of what really Christmas is all about. Where you can remember some of the watchwords of Christmas: peace, hope, love. I just want to remember one this morning. It's a story told by Charlotte Elizabeth Baltimore in a book that she wrote called Life in America. A book full of little stories about significant events in her life. And she wrote about the Christmas that she remembers that really communicated better than any other time what Christmas is all about. It was the year 1947. She was 15 years of age. And she had her heart set on a new dress for Christmas. It had sort of been promised to her by her father and mother, but they had warned her. Times are really tough here on the farm, Midwest, and we don't know if we can afford anything, but we are trying to put aside something for a new dress. A few days before Christmas, she was told the bad news by her parents. And they said, "Elizabeth, you won't have a new dress for Christmas. We'll just share Christmas together, and we'll rejoice in the birth of Jesus." She said, Christmas came. I've got to tell you that I was in a bad mood. I really wanted that dress. And she said, I came and sat by the fire. We had done the chores early that evening. I guess I knew that Dad had wanted some extra time after supper to sit and read the Bible. She said I was not in any mood to hear any Bible stories. I felt I was cheated. Well, Dad came in, and instead of having supper, he just changed some clothes and put on his heavy snowsuit and walked out again. I sat and waited for him, and he came back in, and he said, well, Elizabeth, get dressed. We've got a little chore to do. She said, boy, not only was I upset about not having a dress, I was particularly not excited about putting on a lot of heavy clothes and going out in the brutal cold at night. She said, when I came out, the sleigh was already hooked up. And my dad drove it over to the wood pile and said, Elizabeth, help me load a load of wood. Man, it got worse by the minute. How in the world could I enjoy a Christmas not only losing out on my present, not having really any kind of excitement happen, and not even getting supper, and then loading a pile of wood? I said, where is this going, Dad? And he said, Ed, you know about the Clark family. She lost her husband. And I saw Jeff out by the old wood pile he used to have, digging in the snow, trying to find some chips. They're out of wood. And we're going to take some wood over so they can have a warm house. He said we loaded the wood, and after we were done loading the wood, he got some meat, got some bacon beside that, and he came out with a load of flour and a bag. And he loaded them onto the sleigh too. He said, what's in the bag? He said, shoes. And he opened the bag, and I looked at it, and it was new shoes. Well, I understood we had some meat, and we had some flour, and some things to take over, and we had plenty of wood. We didn't have any money for shoes. What was he doing? Well, we drove over to the Clarks and knocked at the door, and Mrs. Clark opened the door just a crack, and she said, who is it? And he said, it's the Cotton family. We've come to bring you a few things. And so he let them in, and they sat down. The children are huddled in blankets. And Mrs. Clark had a shawl thrown over her shoulders, shivering. There was no heat in the house. And he said, we came to bring you a few things. We've got some meat here and some flour, some food. And then he turned to me and said, Elizabeth, would you go out and bring in some wood so they can have some heat in the house? Give them enough for tonight and for tomorrow too. So I went out, suffered in the cold, while he prepared some food. Brought the wood in, and then we sat down to eat. And Mrs. Clark said, you know, it's amazing, because we were praying this morning for God to send us an angel. And he did. You are the angels sent from God. And then he opened the bag and gave them all shoes, because they were all wearing burlap bags on their feet. I wondered why all the shoes fit. And I just figured, well, my dad's in touch with God. I guess if he was doing that for God, I guess he could guess the size of their feet. But they all fit. And they were all so thankful. And there were tears shed. And there were hugs given. And they said, how can we ever thank you for what you've done? I got out of the house with my father, and he looked at me and he said, you know, Elizabeth, your mother and I saved for a long time to buy you a dress for today. But I saw Jake out there looking for wood with bags on his feet. And I figured they needed the shoes more than you needed the dress. I just hope you understand. And Elizabeth said, my father gave me so much more than a dress. He gave me the happy face of a woman, the smiles of children, and the feeling of warmth and the communication of love. He taught me that day the meaning of Christmas. There are so many stories like that. My only question is, why do they always have to be Christmas stories? Why can't they be the focus of every day that we live? Because the meaning of Christmas is not only consumed in one day of giving, but a proclamation of the world that has to be the concentration of every day of our lives. Amen.